Welcome, gamers and readers. I am MonriaTitans, the writer for the Opinions and Truth blog and the host of the Weekend Game Show, where I educate on and discuss different aspects of game development to show why video games can take years to make to prevent another Cyberpunk 2077 launch scenario. And one of the ways I do this is with the Let's Read Some Shit videos, where I read aloud portions, emphasis on portions, for DMCA and copyright reasons of a couple of books regarding video games, their creation, their impact on the world, to show the legitimacy of video games as an artistic medium, and or whatever I feel like reading at the time. In addition, I also hope to promote literacy as a whole. I also provide artist shoutouts to human artists to combat AI art theft. All of them can be seen on the Become Empowered Instagram, all one word, one E in the middle. All rights reserved by the artists. #CreateDon'tScrape. If this is something you're interested in, then you can find the other videos on my YouTube channel under the handle @MonriaTitans, and also on Buy Me a Coffee, where educational quotes regarding video games and literacy are shared. If you tip through Buy Me a Coffee, 15% of the proceeds, minimum, goes to Kids Need to Read, whose mission is to help children discover the joy of reading and the power of a literate mind. Speaking of artist shoutouts, today we have, and I hope I say this correctly, Yerim Lee. And I found their piece on ArtStation, which you can see on the right there, their ArtStation portfolio website. They also have a Vimeo, and their email address is also available. I think I updated Command ASO, but since we're on YouTube, I don't think I set up commands and whatnot for YouTube, so I guess it doesn't really matter. But if you are on Twitch, you could do Command ASO and get to the link to the original artist shoutout post on the Opinions and Truth blog, which is where I also put the artist shoutouts. You could also put the artist shoutouts. You could also, in Command ASO, get to the link where I actually list where I share the artist shoutouts, and on sale from your wish list, Stardew Valley and one other game. I will look at that later. Anyway, moving on. This artist shoutout choice was inspired by Oxford English Dictionary's word of the day.
Duco.
That is the British pronunciation.
Duco.
That's English. US English, anyway.
Duco.
That's the Australian English. Now, Duco, originally US, now chiefly Australian. It's a kind of durable glossy paint used on the body of a motor vehicle. Also, the surface this produces, the paintwork on a car, truck, etc. And hence the choice of artist shoutout, a vehicle. And since the last two artist shoutouts were filled with the color purple, I found it only appropriate for the third one for Monday, since I do these Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. The last one and the final one for April also had to be purple. Or had to have purple in it. So, there we go there. Hee. Alright. So, moving on. To the read aloud. Alright, here is what we're going through today. So today I will be reading portions of Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States, the Brothers Grimm, The Complete Grimm's Fairy Tales, and 3dtotalPublishing's Artist Master Series, Color and Light. These tend to go about an hour-ish, can be longer, can be shorter, and they go as follows. Read the summary on the back of the book, if applicable. All these have summaries. Read the foreword, preface, and acknowledgments, if applicable. Didn't check. We'll find out. And if there is no introduction, read part of the first chapter. And we shall be starting. And the photos also show the order with the history's people, A People's History of the United States. I can talk. All right, and there is a I need to figure out how to shut off alerts. Anyway, summary on the back for A People's History. With a new introduction by Anthony Arnove, this edition of the classic national bestseller chronicles American history from the bottom up, throwing out the official narrative taught in schools, with its emphasis on great men in high places to focus on the street, the home, and the workplace. Known for its lively, clear prose, as well as its scholarly research, A People's History of the United States is the only volume to tell America's story from the point of view of, and in the words of, America's women, factory workers, African Americans, Native Americans, the working poor, and migrant laborers. As historian Howard Zinn shows, many of our country's greatest battles, fights for fair wages, 8-hour workdays, child labor laws, health and safety standards, universal suffrage, women's rights, racial equality, were carried out at the grassroots level against bloody resistance. Covering Christopher Columbus's arrival through President Clinton's first term, A People's History of the United States, which was nominated for the American Book Award in 1981, features insightful analysis of the most important events in our history. Notification settings, turn on Do Not Disturb. There we go. Okay. Acclaim. Nah. And in the beginning is also a decent sized list of other things he has written. All right. To Noah, Georgia, Serena, Notion, Will, and their generation. Acknowledgments. To my two editors for their incalculable help, Cynthia Merman of Harper & Row and Rosalind Zinn. To Hugh Van Dussen. Hugh Van Dussen of HarperCollins for wonderful help and support throughout the history of this book. To Rick Balkin, my tirelessly attentive agent and friend. To Aquazanze. That was close, I think. To AKWESASNE. Notes, Mohawk Nation, for the passage from Ela Abernathy's poem. To Dodd, Mead, and Company for the passage from We Wear the Mask and the complete poems of Paul Lawrence Dunbar. To Harper & Row for Incident from On These I Stand by County Cullen. Copyright 1925 by Harper & Row Publishers, Inc., renewed 1953 by Ida M. Cullen. A Alfred A. Knopf, KNOPF, Inc., for the passage I Too from selected poems of Langston Hughes. To the New Trail 1953 school yearbook of the Phoenix Indian School, Phoenix, Arizona, for the poem It Is Not. To Random House Inc. for the passage from Lenox Avenue mural from The Panther and the Lash, Poems of Our Time by Langston Hughes. To Esta Seton for her poem Her Life, which first appeared in The Ethnic American Woman by Edith Blecksilver, Kendall Hunt Publishing Company, 1978. To Warner Bros. For the excerpt from Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? Lyric by J. Gomey. 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 Music by E.Y. Harburg. Copyright 1932 Warner Bros. Inc. Copyright renewed. All rights reserved. Used by permission. Alright, and introduction. Introduction to the 35th anniversary edition of A People's History of the United States. Howard Zinn fundamentally changed the way millions of people think about history with A People's History of the United States. It would be the first to say, however, that he didn't do this alone. Oh, he would be the first to say. The book grew out of his awareness of the importance of social movements through U.S. history, some of which he played an active role in during the 1960s and 1970s and beyond, namely the Civil Rights Movement, mass mobilizations to end the Vietnam War, as well as other anti-war movements, and the many movements for higher wages and workers' rights, and the rights of women, Latinos, Native Americans, gays and lesbians, and others. He was also quick to acknowledge the many people who informed his view of history. Woody Guthrie, whose songs about working people in the 1930s and 1940s opened up chapters of U.S. history to him that his formal education had kept hidden. Philip S. Foner, F-O-N-E-R. Herbert Aptheker, A-P-T-H-E-K-E-R. Richard Hofstadter, not quite the spelling, but close. Elizabeth Martinez, and other writers, editors, librarians, and historians who unearthed what he calls the past's fugitive moments of compassion rather than its solid centuries of warfare. But most of all, he acknowledged the people whose stories he weaves throughout the book. Eugene Debs, Fannie Lou Hamer, Frederick Douglass, Plow Jogger. Hello? Plow Jogger. Okay. P-L-O-U-G-H J-O-G-G-E-R. Clearly this was made by white people. Anyway, Howard understood that he was writing to bring their voices and stories, their struggles and vision, to light and inspire people to make change themselves. That is why he was so keen to publish a companion book to this volume, Voices of A People's History of the United States, which compiles the speeches, letters, manifestos, and other documents of people's history that he drew on to write A People's History, and to remind people that this history continues in new forms today. And it is why he wanted to make the documentary film The People Speak, with artists such as Bob Dylan, Kerry Washington, Viggo Mortensen, and Danny Glover, to bring these voices vividly to life. He understood that his own words in this book, as meaningful as they are, are less vital to the success of a people's history than the words and actions of others he wove together into a narrative of U.S. history told from below. Howard was uniquely skilled as a writer, as this book reveals. Millions of people have read this book, a remarkable achievement for any work of popular history, and passed along their dog-eared copies to friends, family, fellow soldiers, and co-workers because it opened up new horizons for them. Of those readers, many went on to become teachers as a result. Many more felt the book had changed their lives and sent them down new paths. I'm one of them. Reading this book, and later having the great luck to meet and work with Howard, radically changed me. It made me care about history as no other teacher or experience had done, and it led me to see history as something that we are all part of making together, and to realize that how we understand our past informs not only how we see the present, with all its complexity, but also how we might imagine a different future. When A People's History of the United States came out in 1980, its first print run was a few thousand hardcover copies, considered modest for HarperCollins. But it soon found an audience excited to read a book that provided such a comprehensive and artful bottom-up view of U.S. history, in contrast to the still dominant tropes of great white men, and the occasional exceptional others, who made history, an especially disempowering view. The civil rights leader Diane Nash, whom Howard knew through his work with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, I hate it when they hyphenate words like that, recently commented on how hard it has been for our culture to embrace histories that feature the efforts of ordinary people, whose names we may not even know or rarely learn from our textbooks. Discussing the critics of Ava DuVernay's 2014 film Selma, who said it unfairly diminished the role of President Lyndon Baines Johnson in bringing about civil rights legislation, an argument with which Howard was extremely familiar, she responded, "Lyndon Johnson was president. It was his job to enforce the law. He should not have waited until Jimmy Lee Jackson's, James Reeves, and Viola Liuzzo's lives were taken." Liuzzo? Liuzzo. Lives were taken. He should not have waited until people were beaten and bloodied on Pettus Bridge before he enforced Negroes' right to vote in the South. Okay. Let me reread that since Pixel Chat completely fucked that up. He should not have waited until people were beaten and bloodied on Pettus Bridge before he enforced Negroes' right to vote in the South. I appreciate LBJ's enacting and signing the Voting Rights Act, but I wish he had been a self-starter when it came to our right to vote, so it would not have been necessary to go to the lengths that we did, organizing a mass movement and risking our safety in order to get the vote. It was the courage, work, thoughtfulness, sacrifice, discipline, and determination of citizens of the United States that obtained our right to vote. Historically, inventions, musical innovations, and many more accomplishments and contributions developed by descendants of enslaved Africans in America have been misappropriated. We learn about presidents, battles, and dates. The impression too often perpetuated in history books and in popular culture is that you have to be a president, someone special, or white to have an important idea or to achieve major accomplishments. This is an idea that disempowers citizens and should not be propagated further. Like Nash, Howard's experiences in the civil rights movement gave him a different understanding of how history is made. It's an understanding that informs every page of this book. When A People's History of the United States first came out, Ronald Reagan was on the path to becoming the president. Culturally, the country was moving noticeably rightward. Movements that sought to roll back the gains of the civil rights movement, women's liberation movement, and other progressive changes of the 1960s and 1970s were gaining ground. Unions came under a sustained attack from which they have never recovered. In such an environment, this book could have been lost, published into obscurity. Why it wasn't is worth considering. First of all, as with any publishing effort, there was some luck involved. The New York Times Book Review could have decided the book didn't merit a review, as it so often does with books written from the standpoint of the left. Having decided to review it, the editors at the Times could have easily sent the book to be trashed by a figure of newly aggressive right. Of the newly aggressive right, as it so often does. Instead, they asked the highly regarded historian Eric Foner to review A People's History of the United States. And while not without criticisms of the book, Foner gave it an extremely positive notice. His words from the March 2nd, 1980 New York Times Book Review are worth considering. The 1970s witnessed an unprecedented redefinition of historical studies. A byproduct of the ferment of the 1960s, in which the distinctive experience of blacks, women, Indians, workers, and other neglected groups moved to the forefront of inquiry. Howard Zinn is the first historian to attempt to survey all of American history from the perspective of the new scholarship. A distinguished scholar and the author of 9 previous books, Professor Zinn is also a veteran of the civil rights and anti-war movements and is currently an embattled defender of academic freedom at Boston University. He is refreshingly candid in announcing his purpose. Too much history, he contends, is written from the point of view of governments, conquerors, diplomats, leaders. His People's History, by the way of contrast, sides with the losers, the downtrodden, the underdog. It is a book disrespectful of governments and respectful of people's movements of resistance. Professor Zinn writes with an enthusiasm rarely encountered in the leaden prose of academic history, and his text is studied with telling quotations from labor leaders, war resistors, and fugitive slaves. There are vivid descriptions of events that are usually ignored. However, Foner felt the book's salutary emphasis on the enormous capacity of apparently helpless people to resist is tempered by an underlying frustration at the meager results produced by this history of resistance. He continues, the stirring protests, strikes, and rebellions never appear to accomplish anything. Uprisings are either crushed, deflected, or co-opted. Apparent victories, such as the emancipation of slaves, simply serve the interests of businessmen. Incremental gains, such as those of the 1930s, merely stabilize the system. Why such movements often fail to achieve their goals is never adequately explained. Foner's view that the book reflects a deeply pessimistic vision of the American experience was, in the end, not shared by many other readers, who saw in the book a more affirmative, in fact inspirational, story. Indeed, Howard is someone who consistently looked for the unrealized possibilities of history. One of the reasons this book has been considered so dangerous by so many figures of the establishment, whether in the academy or the halls of power. Howard was interested in historical potential. The what might have been, the unrealized visions, the expanded horizons of protest, as much as he was in detailing forms of oppression. And a careful reading of this book will reveal, I believe, a deep appreciation of the human capacity to resist oppression, to collectively make history, to achieve ends those undertaking their protest perhaps never imagined possible, and often did not live to see realized in their lifetime, even while recognizing that such gains can prove fragile and can never be taken for granted. For Howard also, there was a joy in the effort itself. He had an appreciation of the bonds of solidarity, mutual affection, and creative expression that participation in social movements produced. The idea that people make history and can alter its course, that institutions have human origins and can be changed by humans, is truly subversive. It is a central reason this book has drawn the ire of so many censors and would-be censors. As Howard wrote at the end of his play, Marx in Soho, remember, to be radical is simply to grasp the root of the problem. And the root is us. Among the first champions of a people's history of the United States were the thousands of students who had been part of Howard's classes at Spelman College and Boston University, and many others who heard him speak on their college campuses and at anti-war rallies, and ordered it immediately for themselves, and in some cases for courses they were teaching. The movements of the 1960s and early 1970s had also nurtured a new generation of receptive readers, many of whom were moving into roles as educators in high schools and on college campuses. Howard's classes were so popular that Boston University sought to limit participation in them. Howard famously battled with the neoconservative president of the university, John Silber, coming close to losing his job on a few occasions, but in the end, he came out on top. Comically, one university administrator responded to his appeal for more teaching assistants for his huge introductory class by saying Howard could have more TAs if he would agree to decrease the class size. Fucker. Instead, Howard enlisted student volunteers who would take his class 1 year for credit and then return the next year to lead sections. In a matter of weeks after the release of A People's History, HarperCollins found, unexpectedly, that it had sold out of the first hardcover edition. Then an interesting turn of history occurred. Howard's editor, Hugh Van Dusen, D-U-S-E-N, went to the hardcover division sales manager to push for a quick reprint and was rebuffed. The previous projections for the book were inauspicious. Perhaps there would be returns. A paperback would eventually come out in a future catalog. But Van Dusen, turning the page, fought for an accelerated paperback release. So, much earlier than planned, the book was available in an affordable popular edition. The book continued to catch on and became, as no one predicted, a cultural touchstone and publishing phenomenon. A book that each year sold more copies than the year before, the opposite of the traditional trajectory. As of 2015, A People's History of the United States has sold more than 2.6 million copies in North America and been translated into more than 20 languages. Rarely does a month pass that I don't see someone engrossed in the book on the New York City subway system. Good. One of the readers of those early copies of A People's History was a young Matt Damon, whose mother, Nancy Carlson Page, was a friend and movement ally of Howard's in Boston. Matt would famously go on to write, with Ben Affleck, a scene in the Oscar-winning film Good Will Hunting, in which the self-educated working-class math genius he plays calls A People's History a book that will knock you on your ass. That moment opened up new audiences for Howard and his book, and his ideas, and A People's History, entered into popular culture. Another reader was the cartoonist Matt Groening, who drew a copy of the book into an episode of his television series, The Simpsons. Later, HBO's acclaimed series, The Sopranos, constructed a storyline around Howard's critical view of Christopher Columbus. The episode opens with a close-up of Anthony Soprano Jr. reading a hardcover edition of the book. But it is really due to the many teachers heroically trying to encourage critical thinking among their students that this book continues to find new readers. This is not without its risks in this era of high-stakes testing and scapegoating teachers, while seeking to dismantle their unions and impose patriotic views of history. In 2014, in Colorado, students and teachers, some holding signs quoting Howard, walked out in protest when a local school board sought to ensure its advanced placement AP history courses promote citizenship, patriotism, essentials and benefits of the free market system, respect for authority, and respect for individual rights. And they did not encourage or condone civil disorder, social strife, or disregard of the law. An interesting challenge if you want to teach, for example, the American Revolution or the history of abolitionism. In Oklahoma, in February 2015, members of the Common Education Committee voted to ban all AP U.S. history courses because they focus on what is bad about America. In the state where I grew up, Indiana, when Governor Mitch Daniels, now the president of Purdue University, sent emails just days after Howard's death in January 2010, openly celebrating his passing and seeking to ensure that no Indiana teachers were using a people's history. This terrible anti-American academic finally passed away, Daniels wrote. The obits and commentaries mentioned that his book, A People's History of the United States, is the textbook of choice in high schools and colleges around the country. It is a truly execrable, execrable? No. Execrable. Anti-factual piece of disinformation that misstates American history on every page. Fucker. Read the book. Can someone assure me that it is not in use anywhere in Indiana? If it is, how do we get rid of it before any more young people are force-fed a totally false version of our history? It is clear why Daniels and his allies felt threatened by Howard's approach to his history. Oop. This is why I hate hyphenated words. Threatened by Howard's approach to history and his politics, and why someone who is seeking to dismantle present-day unions would not have wanted people studying the vital role they have played in protecting the rights of working people, or other examples of popular struggles challenging authority. Despite these attacks, and even at the risk of losing one's job, people have continued to assign Howard's book alongside the assigned textbook, share their personal copies, photocopy sections for students, and read aloud passages of a people's history. In addition to drawing on the book, growing numbers of teachers across the United States use curricula and resources from organizations such as Voices of a People's History of the United States, the Zinn Education Project, Rethinking Schools, and Teaching for Change to bring a people's history to life in the classroom. None of this is to say that Howard does not have his more serious critics, including those on the left. Howard had no issue with that. In encouraging critical thinking, he hoped people would apply the same independent mindset to his own views. That is why he opens A People's History of the United States by stating his point of view very directly. In that inevitable taking of sides, which comes from selection and emphasis in history, I prefer to try to tell the story of the discovery of America from the viewpoint of the Arawaks. 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 You are going to get this right, Pixel Chat. Arawaks. Of the Constitution from the standpoint of the slaves, of Andrew Jackson as seen by the Cherokees, of the Civil War as seen by the New York Irish, of the Mexican War as seen by the deserting soldiers of Scott's army, of the rise of industrialism as seen by the young women in the Lowell textile mills, of the Spanish-American War as seen by the Cumans, the conquest of the Philippines as seen by black soldiers on Luzon, Luzon, the Gilded Age as seen by Southern farmers, the First World War as seen by socialists, the Second World War as seen by pacifists, the New Deal as seen by blacks in Harlem, the post-war American Empire as seen by peons in Latin America, and so on, to the limited extent that any one person, however he or she strains, can see history from the standpoint of others. Howard believed in laying his cards on the table. He did not hide behind the historian's easily available stance of distant, expert objectivity. He had a point of view and was happy to be challenged and engage in dialogue about it. There are some readers who wish he had included footnotes in this volume. Howard felt that missed the point of the book, which was to write an accessible and popular history. He wanted to welcome his readers, not intimidate them or scare them off, especially in a book that, at more than 600 pages, is already daunting to embark on for the first time. Other historians found fault with Howard's departure from the narrow confines of academia. Howard was more comfortable on the picket line than at a session of the Organization of American Historians. He'd be the first to admit. More to the point, some readers have longed for more women's voices. Some have taken issue with his emphasis on spontaneity in history. My own feeling is that Howard's prediction in chapter 24 about the coming revolt of the guards, the intellectuals, the homeowners, the taxpayers, the skilled workers, the professionals, the servants of government, who made up the middle class, when overly optimistic, as he himself later acknowledged, yet at the same time he was remarkably prescient? Prescient? Prescient. In writing about what he calls the 99% versus the 1%, years before the Occupy movement popularized these terms. Interesting, others claimed credit for the slogan, or were given credit for it, ignoring Howard's much earlier use of the terms in this book. But such optimism was vital to Howard's politics and personality. It is what led him to undertake so ambitious a project as A People's History of the United States in the first place, an outcome that he frequently said would never have been possible without the encouragement of his wife, Rosalind Zinn. It is what brought him and his family to teach at Spelman College and become, unexpectedly, participants in the civil rights movement. It is what led him to write 3 plays. Emma, Daughter of Venus, and Marks in Soho. What are you doing? Talking to Pixel Chat. It's skipping words. It is what led him to write 3 plays. Emma, Daughter of Venus, and Marks in Soho. In addition to his many other important works of history. Fundamentally, Howard had a confidence in people's ability to work together and change their circumstances. In a recent essay, the science fiction writer Ursula K. Le Guin speaks of the honest, unpromising search for a realistic hope and a chance to transcend the paralyzing hierarchies of gender, race, class, nation, a chance to find a radical cure for the radical evil of our social system. Howard Zinn believed in taking that chance and holding out that hope. But he did so because he was grounded in all the examples from our past. The abolitionist movement, the women's suffrage movement, the struggle for the right to organize unions and to work an 8-hour day. When people proved that causes that at one point seemed unrealistic and hopeless proved otherwise, in so doing provided what the Welsh socialist and cultural theorist Raymond Williams called resources of hope. In a way, the success of A People's History of the United States is an embodiment of Howard's wager on optimism. A People's History provided sustenance to a progressive countercurrent that developed from the early 1980s and grew as teachers, organizers, and the next generation of students developed new political initiatives and movements. Howard dedicated our book, Voices of a People's History of the United States, to the rebel voices of the coming generation. At every step of that journey, Howard was there to fight alongside them. Throughout his many lectures, interviews, and speeches to anti-war protests, from the smallest gatherings to rallies of tens of thousands, he reminded us of the history of social change in this country and kept coming back to his core ideas. That change comes from below. That progress comes only from people resisting and organizing. Workers going on strike, consumers boycotting, soldiers refusing to fight, saying no to injustice and war. That we cannot rely on elected officials or leaders, but instead have to rely on our individual and collective actions. That change never happens in a straight line, but always has ups and downs, twists and turns, and that there are no guarantees in history. But Howard added distinctive elements to these arguments by embodying the understanding that the shared experience of working alongside others for political change is the most rewarding, fulfilling, and meaningful life one can live. The sense of solidarity he had with people in struggle, the sense of joy he had in life, was infectious. He communicated to everyone around him that they mattered, that they were an active part of making history. In an article on the labor organizer and socialist Eugene Debs that Howard wrote in the 1990s, he said, "We are always in need of radicals who are also lovable." Adding that we need to learn from Debs a determination to hold up before a troubled public those ideas that are both bold and inviting. The more bold, the more inviting. When the actor David Strathairn, 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 read those lines at a celebration, turning the page, of Howard's life and work in California soon after his passing, it was clear to all of us in the audience that those words described Howard as much as they did Debs. Howard's ideas were bold, inviting, inspiring. There are, from time to time, people who can crystallize the aims or goals of a movement in an especially compelling way, who can rally greater numbers of people to take a particular action, and, in the case of Howard, make a lifelong commitment to activism. But such people cannot substitute for a movement. Debs, who understood his problem well, once put it this way: "I am no Moses to lead you out of the wilderness, because if I could lead you out, someone else could lead you in again." That was the spirit of Howard. Think for yourself, act for yourself, challenge and question authority. But do it with others. As he wrote in Marx in Soho, "If you are going to break the law, do it with 2,000 people." And Mozart. In looking at Howard's lifetime of work and his remarkable example, he has something else to teach us that is very important. As urgent as the present moment is, we need to build and strategize for the long term, and have the patience to weather the setbacks and challenges that are coming. The kind of change we want, systemic change, will not happen overnight. Howard achieved much in his lifetime, but as the continued impact of his book attests, his legacy continues. It continues in new scholarship, such as An Indigenous People's History of the United States by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, and A People's History of Sports by Dave Zirin, the album Let England Shake by P.J. Harvey, People's Libraries and Zinn Lectures at Occupy Encampments, and in Movements for Labor Rights, among so many other examples. It continues in classrooms where people are discussing and debating Howard's approach to history. It continues on the demonstrations where people hold placards with Howard's powerful words on war and social change. And it continues now with you. All right. Anthony Arnove wrote, directed, and produced The People Speak with Howard Zinn. He is the editor of several books, including Voices of a People's History of the United States, which Arnove co-edited with Zinn and was released in an updated 10th anniversary edition in 2014. Howard Zinn Speaks, The Essential Chomsky? A book of interviews with Zinn, Terrorism and War, and Iraq Under Siege, and is the author of Iraq, The Logic of Withdrawal. He was a producer of the Academy Award-nominated documentary Dirty Wars, and is on the editorial board of Haymarket Books and International Socialist Review. Whew. And that is the introduction to A People's History of the United States. And since we are 47 minutes into the recording of this video, that I guess that's enough. We move on to the complete Grimm's Fairy Tales. There is a summary on the back. The complete Grimm's Fairy Tales. The Brothers Grimm, Jacob, 1785 to 1863, and Wilhelm, 1786 to 1859, were German academics, linguists, and cultural researchers, though they were legendary, of course, for their storytelling. They collected and recorded stories from the wide wealth of European folk tales, and their aim was to retell the tales exactly as they heard them. The work of the Brothers Grimm popularized such classics as Cinderella, The Frog Prince, Hansel and Gretel, Rapunzel, Rumpelstiltskin, and Snow White. Originally titled Children's and Household Tales, the complete Grimm's Fairy Tales contains the essential bedtime stories for children worldwide for the better part of 2 centuries. Accompanied by 40 color plates and 60 black and white illustrations from award-winning English illustrator Arthur Rackham. The complete Grimm's Fairy Tales is the perfect classic edition for your family's bookshelf. And how far in did I get? I actually started reading these. How far did I get? I made it to page 37. And page 37 starts the pack of ragamuffins. I forgot to mention in the beginning, I picked books from my TBR Stack to read this. The last Let's Read Some Shit was books from my current TBR Stack as well. So, this has an introduction. And I guess I can read the publisher's notes. Why not? Where'd it go? There it is. All right, looking for the thing I was using to focus my reading. All right, introduction for the complete Grimm's fairy tales. From The Frog King and Little Snow White to Cinderella and Rumpelstiltskin. The tales in this collection had already enjoyed a vast audience across the centuries when they were first published by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm in the early 19th century. What began out of the Grimm's scholarly interest in preserving an authentic sense of German culture led to the creation of a literary genre that today continues to entertain children and adults alike. The Grimms were not the first to collect tales. They were preceded by Guillaume Baptiste Basil? 1575 to 1632, in Italy, and Charles Perrault, that one I'll spell, Perrault, 1628 to 1703 in France, among others. Yet the earnestness with which they went about their work, as well as their belief in the relationship between storytelling and society, have resonated so completely that today their names are synonymous with the fairy tale itself. This volume, which includes all 201 of the Grimm brothers' collected tales, along with 10 children's legends, offers a comprehensive collection of their life's work. Born in 1785 in Hanau, Germany, Hanau, Hanau, Germany, Jacob Ludwig was followed in 1786 by his brother, Wilhelm Karl. The two eldest of the 6 surviving children of Philip Wilhelm Grimm. Wilhelm Grimm. What? Wilhelm Grimm. A lawyer and his wife, Dorothy Zimmer. Dorothy. The brothers' comfortable childhood, which included a classical education and Calvinist religious training. Calvinist. Ended abruptly when their father died of pneumonia in 1796. Dorothy moved the family to Kassel, Kassel, where their grandfather, Hermann Zimmer, and aunt, Henrietta Zimmer, took a special interest in the eldest brothers. Their aunt's position at the court of Hesse-Kassel enabled the boys to attend the prestigious Lyceum School, Lyceum, but their disadvantaged situation made them targets of social ridicule. In response, the brothers doubled their efforts to succeed and graduated from the Lyceum at the top of their respective classes. They went on to the University of Marburg, where Jacob attracted the attention of legal historian Frederick Karl von Savigny, who invited him to Paris as his research assistant in 1805. Jacob's work for Savigny centered on the history of ancient Roman law. Oh, you had it right the first time. Savigny. Savigny. Oh my fucking God. Centered on the history of ancient Roman law, which also required him to research related German customs, legal procedures, and literature. Discovering that he was more interested in German literature than the law, Jacob did not return to university and instead accepted a position with the Hessian War Commission in Kassel, a post that allowed him to pursue his newfound passion in his spare time. Jacob's career shift also affected Wilhelm. Although he completed his legal studies, Wilhelm went on to become the primary editor of the collection of folktales for which the brothers are best known. Ooh, I wonder if I could say the German. Kinder- und Hausmärchen. Well, Pixel Chat is set to English, so I can't really get mad at it for not catching that. Translated, it's Children's and Household Tales, published in 1812. As librarians at the Royal Library of Kassel, and later as professors at the universities of Göttingen and Berlin, Göttingen, Gottingen, and Berlin, the brothers effectively invented the study of German literature and folk culture. When Wilhelm died in 1859, Jacob eulogized him as Märchenbruder, fairy tale brother. Wilhelm's passing had a profound impact on Jacob, who worked on the German dictionary, one of many other projects in which the brothers devoted their time, until his own death in 1863. During their initial work on what would become Volume 1 of Children's and Household Tales, Wilhelm was at the University of Marburg and Jacob was working in Kassel. They interacted through mail correspondence as they collected tales and devised an editing process meant not specifically to entertain, but rather to convey a sense of authentic German tradition and national identity. In 1810, their work attracted the attention of their friend and established fairy tale scholar Clemens Brentano, who asked to include the tales in a volume he was planning. The Grimms obliged, but when a year passed without any progress on Brentano's anthology, Jacob and Wilhelm decided to publish their own collection, which included the tales they had sent to Brentano, plus others they had found in the meantime. In 1812, the Berlin publisher Raymer, close enough, released 900 copies of the brothers' Children's and Household Tales. Volume 1 contained 49 tales and a lengthy preface detailing the brothers' perspective on tale gathering in the manner of a scholarly text. The collection sold modestly at first, but became successful enough that in 1815, the Grimms published Volume 2 with an updated preface, again in a run of 900 copies. In 1819, the second edition combined volumes 1 and 2 with further alterations. Wilhelm continued to edit and refine the Children's and Household Tales, which went through 7 major editions in the brothers' lifetimes. The last of these editions, published in 1857, has been the standard for virtually all versions published since the Grimm's death. These collections have been released at an astounding rate, repackaged with new introductions, background information, and critical essays, so that by the early 1900s, Children's and Household Tales was second only to the Bible as a bestseller in Germany. And it continues to hold a similar position around the world, even in the 21st century. This present volume is based on one translated from the German and edited by Margaret Hunt. Hunt's collection, published in London in 1884 by George Bell and Sons, is also based on the Grimm's final 1857 edition. Although the fairy tales became the focus of their works, the Grimm brothers edited Children's and Household Tales while pursuing day jobs and publishing books and papers on topics related to their political and philological interests. such as Songs of the Elder Edda, Edda, EDDA. Jointly, 1815, German Legal Antiquity, Jacob Grimm, 1828. And the German Heroic Legend, Wilhelm Grimm, 1829. Wilhelm Grimm, 1829. Particularly for Jacob, gathering and publishing the tales was always motivated by his convictions regarding German unification. During the period where the Grimms were working, Germany was not a single state. Instead, the German Confederation, established by the Congress of Vienna in 1815, was a loose, politically weak association of 39 German states. The fairy tale project, which is also colored by the brothers' responses to class consciousness in their own childhoods, was meant to help the German people regain a sense of pride that had been destroyed by political turmoil. They were not alone in this way of thinking about the fairy tale, or the fairy story. Long before the Grimms were born, the fairy tale already had a tumultuous history as a focus of political debate throughout Europe. Fairy tales circulated among the aristocracy as entertainment in fashionable European salons and in 16th and 17th centuries. But a combination of Enlightenment thinking, religious extremism, of course, and new philosophies on childhood effectively banished the tales from Great Britain. In the late 18th century, the fairy tale made a comeback in Britain thanks to the efforts of British romantics such as William Wordsworth, 1770 to 1850, and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, 1772 to 1834, who were inspired by the German Romantics, including Johann Gottfried von Herder, 1744 to 1803. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, Goethe, 1749 to 1832. E.T.A. Hoffmann, 1776 to 1822. And Friedrich Schiller, 1759 to 1803. Romanticism, to which the Grimm's friends Savigny and Brentano, like, you got it right once, why can't you get it right again? Savigny. Savigny. And Brentano were also devoted, was an artistic, intellectual, and political movement that revered nature and viewed the imagination as a pathway to knowledge. German Romanticism, particularly Herder's writings on folk tales and national identity, greatly shaped the Grimm's approach to tale gathering. In turn, the publication of the first edition of Children's and Household Tales buoyed the cause of the British Romantics, who were incorporating fairy tale motifs and allusions into their own writings. For both the Grimms and the Romantics, German and British, their belief in democratic principles was fueled by a skewed middle-class idealization of the peasant as a symbol of the ancestor who had lived in closeness to God and nature, marked by a simplicity and naivety of spirit that had become very rare in modern life. Illustrating this idea, the Grimm's tales are populated by impoverished children, damsels in distress, youngest sons, and a myriad of disadvantaged, marginalized characters who usually defeat the wicked witches, dangerous creatures, and ruthless monarchs representing the wealthy and powerful in the real world. As an outgrowth of their romantic belief in a link between tale-telling and national identity, Jacob and Wilhelm saw the individual as a representative of his or her entire culture. Such thinking, which, according to Ruth Baltigheimer, I'll spell that, Botttighimer, MER, and other scholars went untested by the Grimms as well as by their early critics, led to two related misconceptions that haunt the brothers' legacy. First, that the tales were told to them by peasants for whom they scoured the countryside, and second, that their work was limited to gathering and editing, but not writing the tales. According to Botttigheimer, the first misconception circulated at least until 1983, when in One Fairy Story Too Many, the Brothers Grimm and Their Tales, John M. Ellis revealed the truth of the Grimm's methodology, based on evidence he found in early manuscripts sent to Brentano and the Grimm's own notes, as well as other sources. Turning the page. At about the same time in Germany, Heinz Rohrlich reached a parallel conclusion when he began to edit the children's household tales for new editions. Like Ellis, Rohrlich studied the Grimm's editing history, which suggested that the tales came not from peasants via oral transmission, but rather from literate, middle and upper class friends and acquaintances of the brothers. More recently, several studies, such as Baltenheimer's Fairy Tales, A New History, 2009, and Valerie Paradise's Clever Maids, The Secret History of the Grimm Fairy Tales, 2005, have been entirely dedicated to dispelling the myths surrounding the Grimm's tale gathering and editing processes. The significance of establishing the truth of their methodology cannot be overestimated, since it cuts to the very heart of the brothers' belief that oral tradition was an important means of defining and preserving national identity. If they did not gather their tales from peasant folk, who were their sources? Given their actual sources, how did the misconception become established, and why did it circulate for so long? The answer to the first question is straightforward. Based on information from Wilhelm's eldest son, Hermann, we know that the Grimm's main sources included Catherine Wild and her daughters, who lived near the Grimms in Kassel, as well as Hermann's mother, Dorschen Wild, Dortchen, whom Wilhelm married in 1825. Members of the Engelhard, I hate it when they hyphenate words, Hassenflug, Hassenpflug, and von Haxthausen. That's actually kind of close. Families were also prolific in providing tales. All of these families belonged to the educated middle class. The only tale teller who might be considered lower rather than middle class was Old Marie, the Wild's housekeeper. But according to Rohrlich's findings, there was confusion in the Grimm's identification of Old Marie with another Marie, who was the daughter of the Hassenflugs, so we now know that the housekeeper did not contribute nearly as many tales to the collection as Hermann Grimm previously reported. Hermann Grimm. It is not quite as easy to determine why the misconception about the Grimm's gathering methodology remained unchallenged for more than a century. Given the evidence that many of their tales were known in many different cultures, and were passed down through the ages and across great distances, long before being written down by the Grimms, it is perhaps surprising that the myth has persisted. A good example is the Cinderella tale, which enjoys hundreds of variants from Norway's Katie Woodencloak and Russia's Baba Yaga to Kashmir's The Wicked Stepmother and Vietnam's The Story of Tam and Cam. Still, even 30 years after the discrepancies about Grimm's methodology were revealed, most critics tend to blame the appealing fantasy of the brothers interviewing German peasants across the countryside, rather than faulting Jacob and Wilhelm for perpetuating a fraud. One popular place to lay blame is with Edgar Taylor, the editor and translator of German popular stories, which introduced the Brothers Grimm to the English-speaking world in 1823. Taylor's title page identifies the tales as translated from the Kinder- und Hausmärchen, collected by M. Grimm from oral traditions. And his preface indicates that they were obtained for the most part from the mouths of German peasants by the indefatigable this is an interesting word, Indefatigable exertions of John and Wilhelm, the angelized forms of Jacob and... Oh! I read that wrong. German Peasants by... I'm not going to try that again. Exertions of John and William, the anglicized forms of Jacob and Wilhelm, Grimm. Anglicized. While, for the most part, hints at the exceptions that turned out to be the rule, the phrase was overlooked for decades in favor of accepting the Grimm's project on its original terms as a way of creating an identity for German culture from its very roots in oral tradition. Fairy tale scholars such as Baltigheimer and Jack Zipes suggest that the Grimm's passionate interest in creating this identity may have clouded their efforts to look too deeply into the true origins of the stories they were gathering. Zipes points out that if the tales did not come from actual peasants, the Grimms did fashion them from the notes they took as they listened to their sources recite the stories. At least in their own minds, then, their works represented a kind of oral tradition, and its overarching political motivation may have enabled the brothers to reconcile the disparity between their actual tale-gathering procedures and true oral tradition. The extensive editing process the tales underwent after being collected is also critical to understanding the complexities of the Grimm's process. By 1815, Wilhelm had taken on the bulk of the editing responsibilities, but his process derived from that which Jacob had established during his early research into German customs and literature while working for Savigny. Close. Even though the fairy tale project started out as a scholarly endeavor, correspondence between the brothers reveal that they also saw the tales as an income source and quickly recognized children and families as a lucrative market. According to Zipes, the editing did not measurably change after 1815, except in Wilhelm's effort to refine the style and make the contents of the tales more acceptable for a children's audience. Originally, as both an ancient mode of communication and later as a form of entertainment in European salons, fairy tales were not meant for children at all. The Grimm's deliberate shift to children as their audience further underscores their unique approach and lasting influence. Interestingly, Wilhelm focused more on editing out sexual references and situations than on those of violent nature. Even by 21st century standards, many of the tales make adults cringe. Cinderella's stepmother has her own daughters cut off their toe and heel so their feet might fit into the shoe offered by the king's son. Later, the stepsisters are punished by having their eyes pecked by pigeons as they escort Cinderella down the aisle on her wedding day. Wow. Snow White's stepmother is forced to dance in red-hot shoes until she drops down dead, and in The Robber Bridegroom, a maiden finds herself betrothed to one of a group of murderers who are eaters of human flesh. All of those gruesome scenes escape Wilhelm's editing pen, which proved to be much more unyielding in regard to sex. One of the most famous examples is Rapunzel, which in its original version clearly indicates a sexual relationship between the title character and her rescuer, but Wilhelm downplays this in later editions. Fairy tale scholars have long debated the role and influence of violence in the genre, but generally support Wilhelm's editing choices, of course, despite, or perhaps because of, the violence that dominates most folk tales and myths. Psychologists, educators, and critics usually view these stories as necessary components of childhood, and as a means of helping children and adults create strategies for negotiating the challenges of daily life. Aha. The preface to the second edition of 1819 identifies the Grimm's collection of tales as a possible educational tool and indicates that we have carefully removed from this new edition every expression that is unsuitable for children. Yet the brothers also argue for such a work, we do not seek that sort of purity which is attained through an anxious expurgation of everything that relates to certain conditions and relations, which occur daily and in no way can remain hidden. The impulse to do so relates to the illusion that what can be achieved in a printed book can also be done in life. Given the enduring popularity of their tales, Wilhelm's editing choices have proved to be astute and even prophetic. From Ronald Dahl, Diana Wynne Jones, and Alan Garner in the mid-20th century, and more recently to Neil Gaiman, Lemony Snicket, and Philip Pullman, the modern trend toward darker themes, settings, and plots in children's fiction owes a debt of gratitude to the Brothers Grimm. Debt of gratitude. As is often the case with popular creative endeavors, the Grimm's accomplishment was bittersweet. The political and social implications of their work, which Jacob and Wilhelm considered their most valuable contribution, were overshadowed by public interest in the tales themselves. At the same time, while Jacob and Wilhelm enjoyed honorary memberships in professional societies in Germany and throughout Europe, as well as in the United States, most scholars ignored the fairy tales, venerating the Grimms mainly because of their contributions to linguistics and philology. Despite this slight in their own time, one cannot help but think that Jacob and Wilhelm would be pleased that their fairy tale project is largely responsible for the development of the genre. The Grimm's belief in a connection between cultural identity and storytelling has become a widely accepted tenet of folktale studies, but perhaps their true legacy lies in the tale's inescapable presence in popular culture. Because so many of us have grown up with the tales, we commonly understand references to them as culturally ingrained metaphors for milestones of human experience. When an athlete goes from unknown to undefeated, it is a Cinderella story. When a bad situation turns out well, it has a fairy tale ending. And when a woman leaves her single status behind, she might even say she kissed a few frogs before finding her Prince Charming. Films and television shows based on the Grimm's tale have formed a genre of their own. From Julia Roberts as a high-class call girl who finds her prince and wealthy businessman Richard Gere in Pretty Woman, 1990, to Heath Ledger and Matt Damon reimagining Jacob and Wilhelm as traveling con artists in The Brothers Grimm, 2005. Con artists. In print, the most successful example to date is J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series, which easily reads as a modern Cinderella story. Unwanted and neglected by his only relatives, Harry spends his first 11 years living in a cupboard under the stairs. But he is actually a powerful wizard who, after many trials, ends up living happily ever after. While the Grimms did not invent the tales that embody their legacy, their versions are the ones that most of us heard as children, and have retold and appreciated as adults. The richness of the Grimm's tale-telling and their ability to enchant audiences around the world for the last 2 centuries confirmed Jacob and Wilhelm as fairy tale brothers of the highest order. Lori M. Campbell, Ph.D., is a lecturer at the University of Pittsburgh, where she teaches courses in 19th and 20th century literature and cultural studies. Yeah, I think she's the one who wrote the introduction. I didn't read that. So this is about her. Dr. Campbell is specializing in fantasy studies, myth and folktale, the Gothic, and children's literature. Dr. Campbell is the author of Portals of Power, Magical Agency and Transformation in Literary Fantasy, 2010. She has published articles on J.R.R. Tolkien, J.K. Rowling, Frances Hodgson Burnett, J.M. Barrie, William Morris, and Thomas Hardy. And I mentioned I would read the publisher's notes. This Race Point edition of the Complete Grimm's Fairy Tales uses as its source Margaret Hunt's 1897 translation, which was originally commissioned by the publisher George Bell of London. Bell chose to deviate from the then standard numbering by breaking the original tale 151 into 2 separate stories, so that each had its own individual entry. These tales, the 3 Sluggards, 151, and the 12 Idle Servants, 152, account for the 211 tales and legends in this edition, instead of the traditional 210. The illustrations by Arthur Rackham first appeared in the 1909 edition, published by Constable London and translated by Ms. Edgar Lucas. That edition consisted of 60 tales, 40 color illustrations, one of which also served as the front piece, and 62 line drawings, all of which are included here. Cool. And as I mentioned before, I actually did start reading these. I don't understand how some of these were read to children. I'm just going to say that. All right, and last but not least, after a real quick stretch, is Artist Master Series, Color and Light. There is a summary on the back of the book. The Artist Master Series features experts from both the traditional and digital worlds. Drawing from a wealth of experience in this book, they fully dissect the theory and practice of using color and light to advance your art. Ow. I'm reading. Why does my back hurt? What is this? Anyway, expert Charlie Picard goes beyond the basics to explore color theory. Advanced topics include color hierarchy, value keying, color constancy, and exposure. Discover how hue, value, and chroma enable you to create, mix, and control color. Next, he moves on to the vast subject of light. Using highly illustrated examples, complex concepts of shading, form, depth, and texture are decoded. 3 essential material types, matte, specular, and transparent, are analyzed, instilling confidence to paint any object you encounter. Respected artist Jamila Konopf, I figured I was going to butcher that, DJAMILA KNOPF, Guweiz, GUWEIZ, And Nathan Fox, Fowkes, then guide you through extensive tutorials specially commissioned to explore their use of color and light. Each artist breaks down their process, discussing the decisions made at every stage to achieve striking color, believable lighting, immersive atmospheres, and realistic surfaces. All three artists work in contrasting ways, resulting in a wide range of approaches to putting theory into practice. Further insight is provided by the gallery artists, also experts in their fields, representing a range of styles, skills, and mediums. This unique opportunity to study color and light so extensively offers a deeper mastery of the subject and a single comprehensive reference at your fingertips. Warning: contains nudity. Okay, I actually skimmed some of this at one point, and I supported the Kickstarter for this. And fun fact, 1 tree planted for every book sold. 1 tree planted. All right, from 2020, 3dtotalPublishing has pledged to plant 1 tree for every book sold by partnering with and donating the appropriate amounts to reforesting charities. This is one of the first steps in our ambition to become a carbon-neutral company with carbon-neutral publications, giving our customers the knowledge that by buying from 3dtotalPublishing, they are working with us to balance the environmental damage caused by the publishing, shipping, and retail industries. Didn't really have an introduction type thing. And they just have a bit about the publisher in the back of the book. 3dtotalPublishing is a trailblazing creative publisher specializing in inspirational and educational resources for artists. Thank you. Our titles feature top industry professionals from around the globe who share their experience in skillfully written step-by-step tutorials and fascinating detailed guides. Illustrated throughout with stunning artwork, these best-selling publications offer creative insight, expert advice, and essential motivations. Fans of digital art will enjoy our comprehensive volumes covering Adobe Photoshop, Procreate, and Blender, as well as our superb titles based around character design, including fundamentals of character design and creating characters for the entertainment industry. The dedicated, high-quality blend of instruction and inspiration also extends to traditional art. Titles covering a range of techniques, genres, and abilities allow your creativity to flourish while building essential skills. Well established within the industry, we now offer over 100 titles and counting, many of which have been translated into multiple languages around the world. With something for every artist, we are proud to say that our books offer the 3D Total package. Learn, create, share. Alright. In case you can't hear, I'm getting tired. But I still want to read some of this. Alright, contents, how to use this book. So what I'm going to do is, I don't want to get into the meat of this, just like with the other 2 books. So I'll do how to use this book and color and stop there because there's no introduction-y type thingy. Alright, how to use this book. Welcome to Artist Master Series Color and Light. The majority of this book can be considered as 2 main parts, the theory chapters and the tutorials. The subjects of color and light are closely intertwined, forming 2 sides of the coin of art. We highly recommend studying Charlie Picard's Color page 8 and Light page 60 chapters in order to intuitively build up your knowledge of color terminology, color theory, lighting, types, and how different types of light and material interact. These chapters will teach you not only how to understand and control the hue, value, and chroma that create color, but how to create shape, form, and texture with skillful modeling of light and shadows. Studying these chapters closely and practicing the techniques and exercises inside will give you the knowledge needed to improve your digital art, traditional renditions of any subject. The 3 tutorial chapters that follow by Djamila Knopf. Haha! Really? Djamila Knopf. Page 200, Guweiz, Guweiz, page 260, and Nathan Fox, Fowkes, page 302, can be treated as completely standalone projects, but will benefit from the knowledge and terminology set up earlier in the book. Each tutorial is by an artist with a different style and creative background, each tackling scenes with very different focuses and atmospheres. Follow along with these to see how 3 unique professionals apply their knowledge of color and light in practice. Finally, the gallery, page 336, walks you through the portfolios of our 3 tutorial artists and 7 inspiring guests, each sharing some insights into the use of color and lighting and their personal images. Artist tips. Throughout the book, look out for these useful colored boxes, where artists share pro tips, helpful tidbits, and other bonus advice. Color. Charlie Picard. Color and light are 2 closely intertwined subjects. In many ways, they are in fact the same thing, as light is what makes color possible. However, to break these complex subjects down into manageable sections, we will first discuss the workings of color before moving on to the behaviors of light in the light chapter, page 60. In the first chapter, artist Charlie Picard will investigate the different dimensions and interpretations of color, how we see it, different ways we can make sense of it, methods for controlling it, and how we can apply this knowledge both to digital media and mixing physical pigments, both of which I enjoy doing. Let me hop to page 60 real quick and see what's there since it's mentioned. Oh, it's a short little thing. I will read the short little thing. And I mentioned before, this is part of my TBR Stack. I am on page 24 of this myself. Alright, page 60. A bit about light. Now that we have a deeper understanding of the workings of color and how color relates to light, we can delve into the immense topic of light itself. This chapter will begin by introducing the basic categories of light and materials found around us, before exploring further into each, showing you how to portray matte, specular, and transparent surfaces, the objects that combine multiple light and surface qualities. Oh. Again, I'm only on page 24, and I actually need to restart because I don't remember anything I've read. Alright, and that is the portions of Artist Master Series, Color and Light. Again, I don't want to get into the meat. Well, I said if there was no introduction, that's right. If there's no introduction, I will read part of chapter 1. So, I will do that. Although technically, color is chapter 1. There are different sections. I will read section 1. Vision is subjective. Since there is no true introduction. Alright, vision is subjective. We all start out with the notion that our vision is objective. that the way we see things is fundamentally how they are. We imagine that our eyes collect visual effects that we only need to transfer to our canvas, but this is fundamentally not true. Vision, at all levels, is subjective by nature. We don't perceive things as they are, but rather as they are compared to their surroundings. All that our eye can perceive is raw data, patches of light, and anything that we actually understand about what we see takes place in the brain. We learned how to interpret this data as children, so don't remember that it didn't always make sense. Many things that we understand about what we see are not present in the raw data our eyes receive. You know that a pillow is soft and a wall is hard without touching them, but there is nothing in the light given off by those objects that tells you this. It is learned through experience in your youth. For example, hitting something hard and comforting yourself with something soft. We know that distant mountains are still large because our brains compare them to smaller things in the environment, correct for the distance, and arrive at an understanding of their relative size. And then it says figure 1. The distant mountains are objectively the same height as the trees closer to you, but we do not perceive them that way. Things are not objectively large, small, bright, or dark. They become so when our brain makes comparisons. Everything we observe or communicate to our viewer is based on relationships and past experiences. You might understandably be skeptical. You may feel that your eyes have never failed you in navigating the world. How could they be subjective? The illusion on the right might help convince you. It might be hard to believe, but both blue dots are exactly the same size. Get a ruler and check if you don't believe it. One only appears larger by virtue of being surrounded by smaller dots. This illusion is obviously more applicable to shape than color, but I chose it because shape is an area we often feel is the most objective. This chapter will explore many similar illusions. This chapter will explore many similar illusions to show the ways that different relationships affect our perception. As artists, we are visual communicators. We often work within limited means and strive to create grand effects. Our goal is not to reproduce exactly what we see, as this is often impossible and only gives us the most superficial results. We should aim to heighten what we care about in the subject, and understand the subjectivity of our vision can help us use it to our advantage for a greater clarity of purpose in our work. But if everything is subjective, how do we organize ourselves and ground our artwork? There are many ways. Each artwork sets its own rules and can only be judged against those. You are the creator, and you can make the artwork obey any rules you wish. It must, however, be consistent in its own rules in order for the viewer to understand it. We all experience the same physical world with the same physical rules, so studying how light and color work in reality will ground our art for the viewer. This mindset will form the basis of our approach to studying color and light in this book. First, however, we must discuss one idea that is common to every viewer and artist: the idea of contrast and harmony. And there is where I will end it, with part of the first chapter. Oh, despite my issues with Pixel Chat, that was fun. I need to do these more often. Alright, before we get to the closing, here is our artist shout out again. Grimm Lee. And the artist shout out choice was inspired by Oxford English Dictionary's word of the day,
Juco.
which means a kind of durable glossy paint used on the body of a motor vehicle. Also, the surface this produces, the paintwork on a car, truck, etc. And it originated in the US, but now is chiefly Australian. And And with that, so if we were on Twitch, all those commands would make sense. I'm contemplating making a separate closing scene for videos, but I haven't had the energy. And when I do have the energy, I don't have the time because I'm using that energy for other things. Oh well. Thank you a lot for watching. The links and things you see there, well, some of them anyway, will be in the description. There is a MonriaTitans. Where did my wrist thing go for the mouse? Thank you. Sorry. There will be a link called MonriaTitans Summary and Links. You will get to all the links and things there. I forgot what I was going to say next, so I'll just move on. And here is my favorite affiliation. If you wish to support the channel, get more books for yourself, and try, and I say try, because they don't have all the books Amazon does, but if you want a place to look first to get away from Amazon, go to bookshop.org. They actually pay their taxes. So, I like to call bookshop.org the Etsy for small business bookstores. It is their mission to help local bookstores in the age of e-commerce. So, want to help the channel, get away from Amazon, get more books for yourself? That is 3 skips with a stone. You can go to bookshop.org/shop/MonriaTitans and check out the bookshop. I have a section for banned books. That's how tired I am. I'm forgetting my section. So it's banned books, gaming resources, fun reads, history and psychology, and all that jazz. If you want to be a writer and or you want to design video games, you need to read a lot, write a lot, and play a lot of video games. But reading and writing are essential, especially if you want to write video game stories. So do go, please check that out. And now we come to a close. Remember, talking to gamers real quick. We are gamers not because we don't have a life, but because we choose to have many. That's a lie, because that's with readers as well. Ha ha. Back to the gamers, though. If anyone gives you, or if anyone asks you why you like video games, remind them a game is a problem-solving activity approached with a playful attitude. A quote by Jesse Schell. And if anyone gives you shit for your interests, tell them you may not like video games, but what I learned from them is this. No enemies in front of you means you're going the wrong way. And the bit regarding if you want to be a writer, you need to read a lot and write a lot. I need to look it up again, but I believe that was Stephen King. Thank you for watching. May every decision you make be in the spirit of fairness, and may the rest of your day not go to shit. See you next time.